recruiter with the Big Blue Sun Museum of Solar Cooking in Minneapolis, based in our backyard. And I'm here with Mike and Martha Port of Solar Oven Society, Persons Helping People. And one of the very popular models out there that people want the cooker as the sport model that they've had forever. And I am so privileged to be here to talk to them because of the history going back how many decades, and all the people that they've talked to and integrated their thinking into promoting solar cooking, the solar cooking designs, which we'll do a little tour of later. So, and all we want to do right now is just hear the story, as we want to tell it from the beginning to right up to this point in time, as much as you'd like to share.
We're very privileged that you would think of us and come out here and be with us, and thank you so much. So
definitely,
it's just part of a life journey here, and it started. This part of the journey started in 1988 in the fall. We believe in the power of prayer, and both of us were ready for a new situation at work, and we decided we'd like to spend the rest of our lives working together on something, but we didn't know what it would be, and we just had a very simple prayer. We said, God, we want to work together as a couple for you. What would you like us to do? So several months went by. We went up to visit my father in northern Minnesota, and I loved reading the newspaper. I picked up the hometown newspaper. One of the first articles I saw in it was an article about a gentleman from Pillsbury, one of their food scientists, Bill Sperber, and a friend of his he was a professor at Sacramento in the sciences, and the two of them were going to go down to Guatemala to show off a solar cooker made of cardboard, and how you could cook a whole meal just using the power of the sun, and how good it tastes, and how women wouldn't have to breathe smoke anymore, and smoke gets in their lungs and gets in their eyes and causes eye disease, and takes a lot of time usually it was the women and the younger of their daughters who would be responsible for gathering the wood, which by the way is becoming more and more scarce and causing deforestation in local areas. I think this is the answer to the prayer. But so we decided, well, gee, what's next here? Let's do this. And so we came back to the cities, and over a week or two time, we made the decision. Meet the ladies that inspired this, Barbara Kerr and Kerr-Cole down in Arizona. They were the ones behind this cardboard box. Put a lot of time and effort into that. Anyway, so we decided, well, let's do as much as we can, and we learned as much as we could. We had our first solar cooked meal on April 15th of 1989. It was easy to remember the date because it's tax day.
Yes.
yeah.
And interestingly enough, we had it at a group called Feed My Starving Children, because one of their packages of food would fit beautifully into one of our pots. Anyway, it was sunny out that day even, so we had our first solar cooked meal. And we thought, well, gee, what good is a solar cooker if you don't have food to put in it? I think we knew some folks from church, some friends from church let us use part of their 10-acre backyard. And so we decided to have a garden that summer. We quit our jobs at that point. And anyway, we decided, well, how much can we grow in a small area? So we ended up with this system. Anyway, we ended up with 4,000 tomato plants, 1,000 green peppers, and about any other vegetable you can name,
We would cook 2 meals a day
Wow.
while we were gardening.
Leave
Leave the house early in the morning, have breakfast at home, bring lunch with us and dinner with us, and we'd cook the first meal in the solar oven and eat at 12:31, whatever, and then we'd eat again at 5:30.
Sure. So it was about then we learned somehow that every place on Earth gets the same amount of sunshine every year. Doesn't matter if you're at the North Pole or the equator. The North Pole, you get a day that doesn't quit, and a night that doesn't quit, everything in between. Anyway, so we took advantage of those long summer days in Minnesota, because a lot of sunshine. So that fall, gee, we beat the commercial growers in with our tomatoes and stuff by about a week.
And we planted a week to 2 weeks after they planted.
Wow.
The food tasted great. Anyway, next thing we knew, we had a booth at the state fair. And for those of you who don't know about Minnesota State Fair, there's names that have been on the list for 30, 40 years trying to get a booth. We lucked out, somebody at the last minute backed out of their booth in the agriculture building, and we got a call. So
We said yes.
we said we'll be there, and we put our cardboard cooker on display
For a door price.
for door prize.
For the booth.
Had people, sign up for that, and that drew a lot of interest. So here we are at the Minnesota State Fair, 1 million plus visitors coming through the gates, and I don't know how many came by the booth, but it was a lot.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been there.
yeah.
People were much more interested in the solar cooker than they were in the foliar feeding product.
Well, anyway, it ended up, we got another invitation that we could do. We were on the Board of Evangelicals for St. Paul, and they sponsored a radio station out there, KTIS. So anyway, next thing we knew, an invitation to go to the radio station. Well, of course, they couldn't see anything through the radio, but so I manned the booth, and she went over, and we had a pot
We
of-
put the solar cooker out behind the building,
Sure.
and in a couple hours on a warm summer day, we had some delicious food prepared using the Kerr-Cole cardboard model, 3 different pots of food, and when it came time for the interview on the radio station, I brought the solar cooker into the building with the lid on it, and then while we were being interviewed, we opened up the cooker and then opened up the pots.
Yeah.
Well, when you open those pots, steam just
Oh,
comes,
yeah.
out like crazy, and the whole audience just went, "Oh!" You could just hear this on the radio station.
I could hear it I was listening for it. I could hear it on the radio.
Yes.
Yes.
Got him.
So, just by happenstance, one of the people at home that day, actually was
In the car, riding in the
or
car.
was it, okay, was a pastor from Haiti. And he was listening to this whole thing. He told his host, who was a retired engineer from 3M, he said, we got to get a hold of these people. We need that in Haiti. So next thing we knew, we got an invitation to go to Haiti. And so January of 90, we're on the plane going to Haiti. So we go down there with a couple of cardboard cookers. Actually, we were looking around for some of the materials down there thinking, we should be able to find cardboard, because it's amazing how many uses there are for cardboard. And we spent, with Pastor and I, we were out hunting around for a good, maybe 6 hours.
Couldn't find any large pieces of cardboard, so we had to literally glue cardboard together to demonstrate making a cooker out of cardboard. Well, and when we arrived in Haiti, the 2 cookers that we had brought with us, the Kerr-Cole models, on one of them the glass was broken, just from the rigors of traveling.
So he had lined up, so we were in St. Mark, 56. Anyway, he had lined up 2 or 3 stops for us
Each day.
each
Wow.
day. So, as you know, solar cooking, especially the early days, took 2 to 4 hours for about anything. And, the first stop, it wasn't quite ready. We didn't think it was, but they were ready to see it. And we opened that up, and here was the rice. We were cooking rice.
Pot of water and rice sitting on the bottom of the pot.
Oh, they
They
got
laughed
the
at us. Oh, these crazy Americans. Think you could cook with the sunshine.
So we just used some international language like a
Yes.
shrug, So we asked the pastor, do you think we can have another
10 minutes,
20
15 minutes.
whatever, and not knowing if it did, it would be done. Turned out it was enough time. Opened it up at that time, and it was perfect.
The rice was just beautifully fluffed out in the pot.
Oh,
Then, as much as they had laughed about solar cooking, now it's like, you know, they were so excited.
pat each other on the back, and oh man, we were heroes. Then maybe it was the third stop. It was like Minnesota. Here come the clouds. It was that time of day.
Afternoon showers.
And it wasn't like a big rainstorm, but here they come. Cardboard box, rain, oh, okay. So we learned that very first day, well, okay, you know, cardboard, it makes a great cooker, but either we got to protect it somehow. And somewhere along the way, we of course got hooked up with Solar Cookers International, a wonderful group, and Barbara Kerr and
Kerr-Cole.
and
Robert Metcalf.
Metcalf.
Yeah.
They were kind of the
Yeah.
core group of that. And, I called it. We went to some other training, and about that time I thought, you know what? If we're going to be involved in this, we're going to need some income. So I offered to the folks at SCI that we could develop a regional following back here. Well, they weren't quite ready for that. Well, we were quite ready for some incoming. So we went, well, okay, we'll start our own. We then connected up with a trust fund looking for a project. Well, we were a project looking for a trust fund, so we got married.
That's how
that's how
Persons Helping People is the nonprofit name established.
it had already been established.
It had already been established in honor of Virginia Persons.
Oh, okay.
And that's why the name Persons Helping People, which was exactly how her last name was spelled.
Okay.
And she desired for her estate to be used to help feed the poor of the world. Michael Olson was her personal attorney, and he had established the nonprofit. And then they chose to embrace solar cooking as a major project
Sure.
for Persons Helping People, and thus the Solar Oven Society.
Sure.
We hooked up with John Roach, retired 3M engineer who actually, they had a solar division for some time with their films and whatnot.
Which he headed up,
He headed that up.
had numbers of patents with his films for solar use.
And just he really had a sense about reflective angles, the right ones, and good use and whatnot. So that was a valuable.
In the meantime, we ran into Paul Funk.
And then Paul Funk happened along. Paul was the very first person that we know of in the history of the world to get both his master's degree and his doctoral degree in ag engineering.
With the
focus on solar cooking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he got his master's from the University of Minnesota, and then he knew he wanted to get a doctorate in it. He had 2 or 3 different colleges, universities picked out, and one of them was in Arizona, Tucson. So we all piled into the van and off we went to Tucson, and then we stopped at Barbara Kerr's in northern Arizona. And we learned a lot more there again. It was just a wealth of information.
Barbara was a wonderful mentor.
Oh, yes.
Just wonderful. A lot of experience, a lot of practical information, and very willing to share it.
And not just on solar cooking, but solar food drying, and using
Water heating, solar water heating, solar water reverse osmosis.
in one of her kitchen windows, faced south. So she'd just pull up one of the door and stick her pie or whatever
Yeah.
she's fixing out.
She didn't even have to go outside to put her food out. She just put it out through her wall.
And that's
It
just
was
one,
really
one
slick.
solid unit with the angle that
Yeah.
optimum for year round.
Yeah.
Sealed up so it's all weather.
It was just beautiful. It was beautiful.
So back to the cardboard, we didn't figure that out right away. Well, we thought, you know what, contact paper like you would use for your shelves in the kitchen or whatever. That would protect it a lot better than just being bare. So we stopped in Ohio at Rubbermaid. That's their head office. We had a very nice meeting with their foundation fellow. And all we wanted was, some samples. And of course, we liked the contact paper as well, because different designs and women, globally like colorful things. And this would really dress up the cardboard. And anyway, he was excited. We were excited. We went back home. And he ordered it from whatever department. And weeks went by and we didn't get it. So finally one day I called the legal department.
Oh.
And the lawyers were worried that this thing might the cardboard would start on fire, and there'd be a
Someone would be
lawsuit.
burned and there'd be a lawsuit.
The
Whatever.
legal department talked to the physics department to ensure that.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So he got that straightened around, and it was a very nice addition, beautiful addition.
But also, from that first trip to Haiti, Mike and I, on the plane, talked about, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if someday a cooker could be made out of plastic that would be weather durable, withstand heat, would be durable against breakage, and could work for a solar cooker.
Would be recycled plastic.
Yeah, and if it could be recycled plastic, that would be even better.
Yeah.
We had no idea 2-3 years later, that's what we would get into. We felt that mass production was part of the key to keeping costs low. We were happy to share instructions on how to make one out of cardboard with anybody who wanted to. Any materials that we felt were viable options, we would share with people, and we would do our best to put together a cooker out of those various materials. We chose to stay away from the parabolics just because one of the things we learned that women appreciated a lot about solar cooking was they could leave the food in a cooker and go do other things while food is cooking, and they didn't have to worry about stirring it and wasting food to scorching. Parabolics will do a phenomenal job cooking food quickly, but if you are away tending to other responsibilities, just like us in our kitchens, hey, if we forget something's on the burner, we end up with burned or scorched food. So we chose to focus on a slower method of cooking that allowed for women to be comfortable being away, undertaking other tasks without having to worry about food scorching. And that's how we just chose to focus on the general model of a box cooker.
Somewhere along the line, we bumped into a fellow by the name of Dick Wareham. And Dick had businesses in South Africa, and he had seen the need over there. And anyway, he was an engineer, and he loved to tinker and design and whatever. And he had come up with one made out of recycled milk bottles.
He was also one of the original investors in the Sun Stove out of Elgin, Illinois. The Sun Oven.
Sure.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he started a nonprofit in South Africa called the Sun Stove Organization. And anyway, so we met up with him and took one home, and we just kind of fell in love with it. We weren't able to cook with it every day like you would at a lot of places, but when we did cook, we liked it. You're going to see that in a few minutes too. Anyway, we put together an order for him for 1,439 of the casings, and we would do the rest of the work here. Yeah. And so I remember when we first opened the container, and they didn't stack one on top of it. It was like
They did
seven
not nest real well.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
So there'd be seven in a kind of a grouping, and they were just all flopping around here and there. But this is interesting, But anyway, about half of those ended up going to Nicaragua. And it was a nice cooker. We really liked it. And the other 700 or whatever went here and there. And we thought, you know what, Dick, you just saved us a lot of research and whatnot. So that summer, as we were cooking where we were at in St. Paul, we had some nice runs, 4 or 5 days in a row, numbers of times. Toward the end of that, I just started noticing, now, am I getting really weaker, or is this thing getting heavier? And finally one day I said, Martha, we gotta take this thing apart. We gotta see what's going on. And took it apart. And by golly, it used fiberglass insulation, and it was just sopping wet. And we'd also noticed the temperatures weren't getting up to where they
Nearly
used
as
to be.
high.
We thought that was just because it's getting later in the summer. Anyway, we realized that then and there that unless you could seal the insulation off perfectly, that this is going to be a problem. So I was kind of back to the drawing boards. We were quite disappointed in that because we just absolutely loved the design. So about that time, we started working with polyisostrandurate. And that's a closed cell insulation. So water cannot get into the little cells. It's basically waterproof because of that. Plus it had aluminum backing on the outside. And it was easy to cut with a big pizza cutter wheel. If you had the right setup underneath the wheel, you could have tracks. Anyway, that's when we started redesigning the shape. We went from a rectangular shape, straight sides and everything, in order to put them into a container. We learned this from the sun stoves.
We wanted them
We
to be able
wanted
to nest.
So now, the design we came up with, the two-pot model, the Sport, maybe you're familiar with that, but listening to this, watching. It's stackable. We can put the parts, including insulation and whatnot. We can put the parts for 1,000 cookers in a 40-foot container. And the very first Sport was made from 100% recycled nylon, or PET.
Mm-hmm.
So the plastic bottles. Well, the plastic bottles people were really happy about it. That Coca-Cola gave, that first mold was $110,000 for an injection mold. Well, I don't know how big it should be today because that was back in the day. So the EPA Minnesota gave us, I think it was 60 grand, and Coca-Cola tipped in 50 grand. We got that mold. And, so now we're turning out stacks and met our needs. And again, thanks to the 3M engineers and Paul Funk and Martha's, she's got an engineering mind.
And Clinton Loney's contribution from Jamaica to have the lid be recessed so that wind doesn't catch it to blow it away so easily. But also, it has a dome so that we can put another layer of polyester film, which is a better heat and moisture barrier for the acrylic, which is the exterior of the lid, but that gives it much more insulating capability.
So the one thing that I was just adamant about, this thing's gotta be as well insulated as we can make it. So that extra, you got 2 pane windows minimum, some people have 3 pane
The
windows.
double layer on our lid has the same effect of holding the heat in the oven.
The engineers and Martha, they just had the greatest time together coming up with the jigs, manufacturing jigs. And we wanted it so you could make it wherever it went. You didn't need electricity. That was a big part of the formula, and they did it.
And I've seen, when you've had it set up, I've seen it's a flow, what do they call it in lean, where the flow is just all the steps in a row, and
Yeah.
you don't have to have a room this size, or maybe just a small room. You do the whole production in a small room. Yeah.
I guess he's Prime Minister of Oromia, about 35 million people or so. But he was at our shop one time, and Martha had him cut in the insulation. He was a big tall fellow, and he looked down, he'd stop, he looked down. Gee, any one of our people could do this. He was thinking about people who needed work, didn't have training, you could train them and give them a job. And he's very forward thinking and thinking of his people.
It was very clear to us that we desired to have assembly happen in country. It didn't make any sense for people who live on $1 or $2 or $3 a day to pay for American labor to put something together. Plus shipping is so much more expensive because the parts aren't nesting together. And the thought of providing employment for some people in country is very attractive, and to people who want to get it set up. The only thing that has held us back from those major projects of production in countries are dollars. Just have not had the dollars to buy inventory ahead, pay for another set of jigs to be created, that type of stuff, and get them to a specific country and for people to just carry on with production.
So we're in our 70s, and we came to a point where we wanted to work more on that end of the deal and work in some other things that would help the people as well. And we were at a place too where we needed to do something differently about being a 501c3, but being kind of a manufacturing. Anyway, the LLC, we were thinking that might be the way to go. And one of our steadfast users, she and her husband used a lot on sailboats. She called us one day and we got a conversation going, and she put together some investors and we worked out a deal and royalty on sales. Anyway, so the LLC took over and
With our blessing.
with our blessing, and they did a really nice job of marketing and whatnot, but it still didn't meet their needs, as investors. Look, one day they decided that, okay, we're going to give this back, so the molds and everything. So it's been several years now, and we're still looking for. We're very close to getting the money.
We're again in the position of raising funds to reestablish inventory and carry forward.
And so now with all the other people with new designs and everything, and then with COVID, and anyway, so we're close to doing that. And it's amazing how many people have called us saying, gee, I've had my sport for 15 years now. I think we did here 20 years. It was 20 years ago, 21 years ago actually, our first ones. But I need a new lid, or I need,
Sure.
or I got, my kids are grown and they want one. And boy, is that ever lifting. I mean,
It's
really,
gratifying to know
boy,
that. Yes.
yeah,
Very
it's
edifying.
amazing,
Yeah.
So that has helped keep us in the game, keep our.
Well, on the drive here, we're trying to think back. Of course, 06, you spoke to my class. By then, I think I was already on the third one because I'd given one away, and I always wanted to have 2. And I know that I have at least 8 because I have 8 of the yellow booklets that you put in each one.
Yes,
And those are the
okay.
ones that I have in a stack. I have more in the garage, so I probably have gone through 10 or 12. That's the best sales is word of mouth with people that use them
Well, and we grew to the point where indeed we did have to make a decision about an LLC. Either we'd have to establish our own or have another LLC do the manufacturing for us.
You've got kind of an archive of one thread of the development of solar cookers here, but along those basically in the same philosophy, right? I mean, you're not going for a parabolic, you're not going for the vacuum tubes, which are lightning fast,
We encourage solar cooking. It doesn't matter if it's
Right.
a parabolic, it doesn't matter if it's a box, it doesn't matter if it's a reflective panel. Solar cooking works wonderfully. There are hundreds of credible models.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And there's more and more being commercially produced, which is wonderful because more people find out about it and more people can use it.
I like people.
And it's amazing how often in developing countries we get asked, how many Americans use these? And we can literally tell them tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands at this point. And that leaves them feeling more comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the other things that has to happen if more people that need these on a daily basis, really need them, to cut down on deforestation and all the other things, is we as a society, we have to do a better job of thinking through people being able to purchase them on time. The savings that they would spend buying charcoal or buying wood, or the time that they would spend gathering it, because you can do other things at that time to make money. So we like the idea of, personally, of having a developed country pricing for Europe or Tokyo or Japan or here or wherever, and with more traditional pricing, and put as much of that pricing towards making it available to the developing countries.
Our overhead, yeah.
But the other side of that coin is people shouldn't be given a solar cooker at the other end. They must pay something for it. If they don't pay anything for it, it's amazing. You go up on a corner shelf in their home somewhere, and they won't use it because they want to, if the person comes back, they want it to look nice yet.
They don't want it to look used, they want it to look nice yet, to show their great appreciation of it. But the whole purpose of it having been given is for them to use it, and it's been missed.
Yeah.
That happens repeatedly with any numbers of commodities.
I had lunch with Dave Wareham, this Dick Richard's son,
Mhm.
10 years ago in Milwaukee. And he talked about the Sun stove where they originally ordered a bunch and gave them away, and then 6 months later he comes back to South Africa, visits people that got distributed to. The reflector is is a bathroom mirror now.
Yeah.
The cook box is their washing basin. I mean, they had taken it apart to use it for other things.
Yeah.
And maybe because a wash basin costs X, well, I got a wash basin here. A mirror costs X, so now I got a mirror.
Yeah.
As opposed to buy it for what it's for. I vividly remember that story because it's about 25 minutes into our lunch when he talks about that.
Yeah.
And why Richard said people got to have a stake in it. He wants to make sure they have an option of they're either going to buy for themselves or be able to make a living making them or distributing them, and so forth.
We spent several days with them, showing them completely our entire design and how we executed, so that it could help them.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to move forward where we were waiting yet for a new mold.
Mm-hmm.
It was on order, but it takes numbers of weeks for it to get built and tested and be functional.
Sure. Well, that illustrates, having talked to so many now that make them, they're almost all are of this open source thinking, where they're like Sharon Clausen with Copenhagen. Take it, run with it, riff on it, do what you want with it, make it yourself. I don't, she's not, after all, I'm going to go after you if you make it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I forget which lawyer we talked to about, trademark, copyrights, whatever, patents. First of all, there wasn't much we could patent. It was a design patent. But we got some advice that we really stuck to it. You know what? Your patent's only as good as
the amount
defending
of
it.
money you want to spend in court defending it.
Yeah.
So we thought,
As a nonprofit,
whatever.
we started with nothing.
And so it became, hey, if you can do a better job with this design, go for it. So
Well, that kind of brings us up to today. Is there anything more of the history before we do the magical solar cooking mystery tour?
There is, you're going to see the next one for our group.
Sure.
It's being field tested now, but you'll see that here in the next few moments.
Sure.
So we want to thank you and Joan for doing what you're doing, including coming out and spending time with us, and back to 2006, inviting us into your life. But what you're doing for the solar cooking industry, if you will, is remarkable, and it's very much needed and appreciated.
Well, thank
we
you.
wish you the best. I can't wait till we get a museum building.
But thank you, because the history is so important. When I got out of college in '85, and I thought, well, I didn't take very many history classes at the university, and I really just started to regret that. As with solar cooking, if people know the history, they'll know, you know what, people have thought through this. People have tried some things that failed, but tried a lot of things that have worked. They'll learn that, I have found with 70 cookers, I've only had one that just didn't seem to work at all. The rest worked to some degree, at least.
Yeah, there's a
Usually-
lot of different levels
Yeah.
of performance.
And the ones that never said, hey, you can cook your turkey in the same amount of time as you do in your gas range inside, they don't tell you, they don't say that. They say it's going to take longer. So what? It's actually probably going to taste better because it's cooker at a lower temperature.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I appreciate it. I mean, the amount of history that's followed the track from the very beginnings and all the way through what you're doing today, it's vast. I mean, Barbara Kerr, Dick Wareham, Bob Metcalf. I mean, how many other names can you drop? And it's real. This is not just you saw them at a cats party in Hollywood and Vine.
John Roach and Paul Fung.
Yeah. I mean, so anyway, so that's why I'm just thrilled that we're able to do this, and I can't wait to see the story behind some of these models. I know a little bit about one or two of them, but some of them wow. So thank you. We will turn off these devices to save some batteries so we can do some more.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you again.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
Our first experience with solar cooking was a meal on April 15th of 1988 in a Kerr-Cole cardboard solar cooker. Barbara Kerr and Sherry Cole, along with another friend of theirs, I forget her name, Barbara had a real keen interest in solar, and so as she said, on one dull gray day, I wondered if we could cook a meal with solar energy. So they started playing with cardboard boxes and putting one inside of another, insulating them, putting glass over the top. And the gist of that matter was, yes, they could cook a meal. So then they started playing with additional designs. Her basic design is a cardboard lid that goes over two other boxes, one smaller box set inside of a larger box with a reflector panel that when the sun shines in, it will bounce additional sun into the cooker. She had a sheet of glass on the top, mounted between two pieces of cardboard and sealed off with I don't know if it was a silicone caulking. She used a caulking for automotives that withstood temperature. And they may have been a silicone. I'm not familiar with them to know that. We have used silicone here. And then on a lot of her solar technology at her residence, she used pressed fiberglass that would allow the sun to pass through it, but would be nice to prevent breakage of glass. So she incorporated a sheet of the pressed fiberglass into her traditional cooker. And if we take the lid off, she used a prop stick with the lid so it could be adjusted to withstand wind. In the cooker, she had a tray of aluminum that was a black color, and then just simply the cardboard interior, which is lined with aluminum foil. Now, as a part of making it a well-insulated box, she used flaps, which I can take this out completely from the cooker. But you can see here the outer box, the inner box, and then going diagonally through that lower cavity, she also had another sheet of cardboard that went diagonally from the top of the inside box to the bottom of the outside box. And then she would use crumpled newspaper for insulation in between both sides of that diagonal cut. So she had a very effectively insulated box, and it did work very, very well. She also then proceeded to make a cooker out of a plywood, and that was when Robert Metcalf got involved. He saw what they were doing, and he called and asked if he could buy one of their cookers. Well, Sherry said, yeah, you can buy one of them, but little did they know how in the world they were going to get another one made in reasonable time, and then how were they going to ship it to Sacramento? And they ended up bringing it down to the bus station and checked it as a piece of luggage on a bus going off from Taylor or whatever cities, maybe Snowflake
Yep.
or what's the bigger town, Mike?
Taylor,
Show, Arizona, off to Sacramento, California. So this is the traditional cardboard cooker, and it is what we went with to Haiti the first time, our first trip out of the U.S. As I mentioned earlier in the videoing for the podcast, our sheet of glass was broken on the airlines. So when we got to Haiti, they really rushed us through customs because they didn't want the broken glass all over, which was nice because then we didn't pay any duty on anything that we were bringing in.
Sure.
We realized in Haiti, obviously, that cardboard has a lot of liabilities when it comes to moisture. And when moisture gets to the cardboard, you know, after 2, 3, 4 episodes, depending on the amount of liquid involved, you really are dealing with quality, integrity for having a seal for cooking and so forth. So we started building cookers out of plywood, and I mentioned plywood, galvanized metal, fluted plastic, the cardboard, I don't remember what all we used, whatever we could use, masonite. Every material has its unique challenges, it seems like. We went to Jamaica with plywood ones, and they were heavy to carry outside and carry back into your house at the end of a day when you were cooking. So it ended up, as Mike mentioned, that we imported these plastic housings from South Africa, from Dick Wareham. This is one of his sun stoves. And it has an acrylic lid that just rests on the edge of the thing. We found a couple of limitations with it. One, wind would flap it like this, and then it would allow some of the heat to go out. And secondly, if I think I can undo this, you will see that the insulation is fiberglass, and fiberglass is very capable of absorbing liquids. There is always moisture given off in solar cooking. Every meal that is prepared, when food is cooked, the natural juices in the vegetable, the fruit, the meats, whatever it is, evaporates into the air, and it can travel very effectively through, you know, very little holes or very little cracks. We have a little story to tell on this cooker. It's Dick Wareham's design, and he gave us a cooker, and we were able to take the liner out of it so that we could see the cut of the pad for the base, and then get a shape for the fiberglass wool.
Sure.
And his aluminum, he had men beat folds into the aluminum, so there'd be a fold going down here, a fold here, 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 and there. And it didn't look real attractive after being pounded with hammers to make the folds. And we had a friend, Gene Smith, his good buddy was a metal worker. And Gene brought his metal worker by to have us take a look at the liner. And he said, oh man, he said, you could just do this and that. And he adapted a couple of tweaks to the pattern. And we get this nice sweeping curve,
Yeah.
you know, and on each angle. And anyway, when Dick Warren saw this for the first time, where'd you get that? I need that. You give me that. He was amazingly impressed. When insulation is fluffed out with a lot of air pockets, it's very effective. But when it gets squeezed to a thinner layer at the top all the way around, which is where the greatest temperatures of the oven go, because heat goes up, the insulation is less effective as it gets squished together.
Still work great.
It helps.
Sure.
You know, and obviously the rest of it and the balance of it is very purposeful.
And you slice it, it's the batting so it ends at an angle, so or you just put it up there, you make it a little
We just
thinner?
put it up and it gets
Okay.
squished.
Okay.
Yeah. We used 2-inch fiberglass wool
Okay.
on that.
Sure.
So we sold out 1,400 of these, minus the one that we gave to Dick Warren.
Yes.
A lot of people contributed to our design. It's not our design. Okay, on this table, we're looking at some designs that Paul Funk was researching as part of his PhD research and or just of his own inquisitive mind during that period of time.
Sure.
And this is a wonderful design. It's totally sealed other than at the bottom. So this lid that has 3 folds in it, one here, one there, one there, it simply lifts up, and it's so easy to set your food in and take your food out. You don't have to set a lid at another location. You know, you're not going to burn your hands while you're maybe just looking at something and stirring with another spoon. If you're going to touch the pot or take a lid off of a pot, you're going to obviously need hot pads, but
Sure.
it reduces some need of a hot pad. And it's a lovely, lovely design. We've played with the idea of having a cooker use this technology, but a challenge becomes another insulating layer, and how do you attach that? And the second challenge is how you would latch it shut. You know, because this is flat on a table, so you can't bring anything over across the base. You can maybe have some small bungee cords that might attach to something. I don't know.
If the weight is enough to seal it, is it even a problem? I mean,
Well, depending on what materials, this is simply just insulation.
I was going to say it looks like just the.
This
like
one
the-
is just the insulation
Yeah.
used for the shape of it.
Yeah.
And this is at a slight diagonal so that it seals off with that. Wonderful potentials.
Sure.
This is a cooker that Paul made using electricity. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'll move this off the table. When clouds come over, it has the potential to be plugged in. And inside of the oven, you'll probably have to lift
Oh,
your camera
The light
up.
bulb?
There's 2 light sockets.
two of them, yeah.
Yeah, one in this
Yep.
corner, one over in that corner. And he did this one with a lovely mahogany housing. Mahogany is one of the best woods to use around heat and moisture.
It reminds me of chicken coop, where they have just the light bulb and Albuquerque.
This cooker is a very interesting design. It's that cooker as well as this cooker have the 2 layers of a polyester film and I think a polycarbonate or
Oh,
an
sure.
acrylic on the top of this one. I'm not sure which it is. Inside of this oven, you have a double convex lens. You can see it there. And your pots would sit on top of this metal tray that goes over the double convex lens. Your food would sit here. Sun would come in, from any angle. You wouldn't have to readjust it and bounce off onto the pots. It even, when it gets down into this area, it ends up bouncing up underneath the metal to provide heat from the bottom in the pots also. Interesting potential. And you could have 3, mid-sized pots on there or 4 smaller pots, whatever you wanted it to be. Gets a little bit bulkier because of that. So this would have been from the 1980s. And,
Okay.
Barbara Kerr had a book that logged a whole bunch of solar cooking models and their history where they went back to.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing.
This is
I
cute.
I have seen that book.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
If she gave us one, we would have it in storage
Sure.
at this time, and I don't recall specifically, but
Sure.
boy, if we see that, we'll.
Oh, that'd
keep
be
it in mind.
fantastic, yeah.
When Y2K was being addressed and all the concerns if the power grids were going to go down, were computers going to be non-functional, what was really going to happen, nobody knew. We had numbers of families, and we were, I think, between a broken mold and a new functional mold at the time, so we didn't have cookers that we could sell. But people were saying, well, what can we do? What would you recommend we would make so that we indeed could be feeding our families? These were young parents with little children, and they were genuinely concerned, what can we feed our families? So Mike and I put our heads together, and we came up with what we felt was a pretty simple design. We used 1.5 inch insulation and just cut off, I guess, a 30-degree angle here, and angled the edges of the back wall and the front wall to follow the same 30-degree angle. This is simply the corner guard for wallboard, which we notched and folded around the edge and sized a wood frame that would fit inside of there. And then we taped polyester film to the bottom side and to the top side, so that again it would be double layer of insulation. We put our typical metal tray on the bottom, this one being a dark brown one, and then to make a liner simpler, we just came up with another triangular tray for the back wall. And when the lid is on, that back wall will not fall forward. And then they had room for, 3 medium-sized pots in there to be able to cook their meals. And at very good insulation in case it was below 0 weather, which in Minnesota in January, that could be a very good reality. Brian Sugden called us one day. He had purchased a sport solar cooker, and he was from Effie, which is up towards International Falls. It was a January day, and he called. He was so excited on the phone. He said, "This sport never ceases to amaze me." He said, "Our temperature range today was -43 in the morning," and this is Fahrenheit, not centigrade, -43 Fahrenheit to a high of -14. He said, "I set my sport out in the snowbank." He said, "I baked a squash in there, It was 370 degrees in the solar cooker with a temperature range somewhere between -43 up to a high of -14.
Yeah, 60-degree.
Yes, and he didn't have it on this 30-degree angle. He set the cooker on this 60-degree angle. Had reflectors on it also. Here's the sport with reflectors. And it can be tipped on its back wall. So now the sun is at its low angle, is shining directly into the cooker, warming things up. The reflectors are bouncing additional sun into the cooker. The snow is now bouncing off of snow and into the cooker, and bouncing off of snow onto reflectors, putting additional sun in the cooker. And that's how it got up to 370 degrees. And you know, we tell people, hey, when you see the cooker getting up to 280, take the reflectors off. We don't want it to warp the plastic. Well, when it's that cold outdoors, that plastic is not going to warp. So it was really interesting that it would go way up to 370 degrees in those temperatures in northern Minnesota. So we knew that this would work well for needs for Y2K, if that was necessary. This cooker here, we put together. It's with an aluminum printing plate on the exterior, aluminum printing plate on the interior. We caulked the seams and used pop rivets, you can see them, to seal off a lot of the interior. I presume that this one may have pressed fiberglass, but this is what we had hoped the sport would really become. We were hoping it would be a larger size like this that would hold 3 or 4 pots, have the 2 layers. On this one we hinged, 2 hinges up there, we just hinged the lid, used a wood frame. We knew that we wanted to stay away from a wood frame because of termites in many countries, and this is a no-no. We have a gal that just took some sports and some of the new Mary's cookers to Zambia, and they are so pleased with it because there's so many termites. The termites will even eat concrete.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? So this was the preliminary model of what we had hoped would become our sport. Well, the size, we decided to go with injection molding because we could get 1 million parts out of an A1 mold class, a class A mold. And we thought, if this does really catch on, we will ship hundreds of thousands of cookers. Why not pay for a little bit more for a better quality mold and help keep the costs lower. The size of machine required to produce this mold of that frame, I'm going to just take the lid off here, which we don't have to take the reflector off to take the lid off. But this size of a mold that you see here takes, is it 100,000 ton machine, Mike?
1,000 tons.
1,000 tons. At the time in Minnesota, there were only 7 shops that could do. The challenge with that is, whatever companies are requiring the 1,000 ton machines, they've got their orders in and they keep running them and running them. And it left fewer options for us to even find a molder that could do it. But eventually we were blessed with that to be able to come. The insulation is a closed cell insulation. It does not absorb any water. I want to take one of those out. There we go. You can see as you cut through it, I don't know if it shows up on the camera or not, the open cell, you know, in numbers of places. You see where we're cutting through a pocket of air. Very, very good R value for insulation. And the other gem of it is that it does not absorb moisture. So basically, every time that people finish cooking, we tell them to take the cooker, their pots and pans are out of the cooker, and tip the cooker towards one of the front walls and pour any water out of it that has condensed from the cooking process. And once in a while, we'll get calls from people and they'll say, my solar cooker has really started stinking.
Yeah.
I said, I bet I can tell you what the problem is.
What I'd say is, I know what I cooked last, because I do drain it, but there's always a little bit of the banana bread or a little bit of the stew.
Yeah.
But it never gets to that point. But
Yeah.
the only thing I'd mention is everyone should do that, because if there is water in there, yes, it doesn't absorb it, but if the water is, like, say, a half inch, if it's collecting and it's in our back porch, I'm convinced one of ours, the performance is diminished slightly, 20, 40 degrees, because of the freeze and thaw. It's cracked up some of the insulation. So it's not a flaw of the insulation, it's desperately make sure, if you have one of these,
You
make
dump
sure
the
you dump it
water
out, especially if you're in Arizona or wherever, you know,
Where it's
it'll
not
never get
going to
below
freeze
freezing.
and you're not going to have
Exactly.
the integrity of the foam
Yep.
breaking down. We're proud of the fact that the sport does hold 2 good medium-sized pots. Larger sized pots really don't equate to solar cooking. So we had them keep this down low, you know, just so that it was a smaller chamber to open up. When we sent one of our first cookers to Barbara Kerr to have her test it out and give us her critiques on it, she opened the box and she was so disappointed in the size of it. She said, what in the world were Mike and Martha thinking about? It's so small, you know. And she said she literally just set it aside in the corner. She was so disappointed. She wasn't going to do anything with it. and then after a few days, she thought, no, it was Mike and Martha are my good friends. She said, I told them I would critique it. I can't just say no. So she got it out of the corner, out of the box, and put it out. And she was just shocked at how well it performed. And that was without reflectors. We did not make reflectors for the first almost 3 years.
Oh.
We didn't sell one set of reflectors because it would perform without them. Now, there are some applications where the reflectors are definitely an advantage. So they can be included with the sail. They connect with the springs and links to the corners. They don't have to be taken off to take your lid off of the cooker, but they will fold up nicely when they do come off. The lid is the feature that is a big explanation of why the sport works so well and so many people are so pleased with its performance. And you can see there's about a 1-inch gap between my hands, the polyester film on the inside and the acrylic on the outside. So it's very, very insulating. And that is our sport.
It's boat proof.
Yeah. You can have a boat jump on there and it's not going to break. You can drop a stone on it, it's not going to break. The Sport Solar Oven, in our last production runs, we were able to sell that for just under $100, $90 for developing countries. That was basically our expenses and just a few token dollars of quote-unquote profit. It wasn't profitable. In developing countries, the big challenge is for people to come up with cash to purchase a solar cooker. They like solar cookers. They've tasted food coming out of solar cookers. They're excited about it. Yes, they don't want to breathe the smoke. Yes, they'd like to have more money for other family needs. Michael started taking serious looks at what could we do to come up with a less costly model. And he challenged a group of gentlemen that would come in and do assembly for us on a weekly basis. And several of those were engineers and or with other good backgrounds to throw their ideas together. It also included John Roach and Bob Knepper from retired 3M engineers. So John Roach basically came up with this model, and you can see, has much larger reflectors than what the Sport has. So indeed, this cooker will get hotter faster than what the Sport will because of the size of the reflectors. The lid inside is a single sheet of polyester film that's taped to a wire frame, and then the pot sits on a base which is darkened with black paint. It indeed heats hotter and faster than what the Sport does, but as soon as some clouds might come through, it cools off much faster than what the Sport does. But it's less money than what it costs for the Sport. It does hold only one pot. The Sport holds 2 pots. So there's pluses and minuses to both cookers. For us as persons helping people, it gives at least 2 choices within our impact. And this is being field tested in Haiti right now, and the women that have one have thoroughly enjoyed it. The one criticism they have is that it will blow in the wind, which we knew that it would. And we went to this larger baking tray so that they could put rocks here to help hold it down, and or put a stick across it there and put rocks on the sticks outside of the tray. Do the same thing just across the back with some sticks and rocks to hold it down. That can work well, but it's a lot of manipulation to get it, finding the perfect sticks for it and the perfect rocks to set on top of the sticks. So that is one thing that they would like improved on it. And Bob Knepper and I, while we were working on the jigs for cutting and scoring and all the other technologies, the links that hold the wrap together, we talked about if this could be mounted to, we wondered about like a service tray that waiters and waitresses use, Well, they're pretty pricey if you're going to get some heat stability with them. And then we wondered about, well, how about 5-gallon buckets? Could it be attached to that? And we threw the idea out because of, well, if this is a problem in wind, a small round circle the size of the lid of a 5-gallon bucket is going to be all the more vulnerable to wind. So we wondered, well, can there be something that would be tie-downs to some stakes in the ground, or just exactly what? We continued to move forward with the tray. When Michael Larson, who is the head of Vine Works, he employs Haitians to do some really beautiful artwork. A lot of Christmas tree decorations. They use the steel drums and pound them and paint them or whatever into some wonderful shapes. And they really do a really fine job. He runs that as a business, a for-profit business, and it has been profitable for him. They like it. Anyway, he has some good engineering skills, some good production skills, some good business skills. And he went with the shipment of our Mary's cookers down for this field test. He knew all the assembly steps and can supervise the Haitians on learning the steps and executing it for the 25 cookers that we sent down. He also tuned into the fact that this was vulnerable in wind still. And he came up with the idea, we hadn't said anything to him about a 5-gallon bucket. He went back to the 5-gallon bucket. What he added to the equation that Bob and I hadn't added to the equation was for that bucket to be filled with water and weighted down, because water is heavy, or with stones, or with dirt, or whatever people had available to them. And so now we are, I'll show you, here's the lid that's in the cooker. Just a sheet of polyester film that's taped to the wire frame. It has a double prong in the front so that it's not going to go tipsy-turvy. The double prong keeps it from twisting. And here's the opposite side that goes into a slit in the fluted plastic. This is cinched right to the lid of the bucket, and the bucket can snap, the lid of the bucket can snap onto the bucket and be held down with the weight of the cooker. Another advantage with it is that it now does not require that you would set it on a table or that you have to work in it set on the ground. It raises it up, like about that much, makes it much easier to work with it. So, interesting ideas come from lots of people. And that's what we're working with right now, is moving forward, trying to finalize our design with the bucket.
Sure. Wow. And how long has it been down there, and how many test units are?
There's 25 ovens down there.
Okay.
There's some in Zambia.
And there are now some in Zambia. And where else did we send some? Wasn't it?
Nigeria. 3 to Nigeria.
Yep, 3 to Nigeria. Anyway, it'll be just interesting to hear additional comments coming in from the field.
Sure.
But what's nice about this, it reduces an introductory level, the cost, so that people can get venturing into solar cooker, saving up less money. A big, huge part still for the equation to advance solar cooking major scale is to have financing available to the people who want to purchase. And that loan doesn't have to have the 20-25% levels for investment that some of the other micro enterprise things have had. They can get by with 5% or 8% or something like that. And people can pay for their cost. Might not be the full cost, because it might be subsidized by a church or by Rotary International or who knows what. But the cost that they pay for, they can pay for from their savings, purchasing charcoal or wood or bottled gas, if that's what they're using.
Well, at Luther again, we visited Mike and Martha a couple months ago, 3-4 months ago, and they talked about Mary's cooker, which is right here. And while we were talking about some innovations to make it secure against wind, because these things can be, any solar cooker can be that way, where the reflector is just like a sail that can catch the wind. And I've got Michael Larson here, who has helped them out, putting together a way to secure the cooker. So tell us how this came about.
Correct, yeah. So we were in Haiti. We took 30 of the Mary's Cookers last January and hosted a series of cooking classes, and the only negative comment we got back was that they were blowing over. And obviously food is precious when you're living day to day on barely $1 a day. So we had to come up with something that would secure not only the cooker but their food as well. So the idea was to use a 5-gallon bucket. In Haiti, the vast majority of the people are literally fetching water by bucket for their cooking and bathing needs, so they would be very comfortable, obviously, not only working with a bucket, but they have access to it as well. So the concept was to basically reproduce this base onto a bucket design, and so the concept was just to use materials that were inexpensive, readily available, and be able to use any 5-gallon bucket. So just drilled 4 holes in the top, which then preserves the integrity of the bucket, so it still can be used. And then these are just inexpensive bungee cord. So easy to connect, easy to disconnect, but this also then will keep it secure for the wind.
Sure, and easily 30, 40 pounds fit in the bucket, and that could be rice, could be stuff to cook, could be utensils, mix and match.
Yep, or if they have a spare bucket, it could be just rocks or dirt, and
Sure.
that would even weigh a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And the flute board, that's going to last a good long time.
Correct.
Are there plans for something other than the plywood here? Is this a prototype, or?
This is a prototype, so I think ultimately it could be made into some sort of plastic molded lid that would even just fit within the bucket itself, and would just either snap on or twist on. So this was just the test prototype model to see if it worked, and it does work.
Sure.
Tested in a wind of about 25 plus miles an hour, and this flaps a little bit like a sail, but it ain't gonna go anywhere.
Sure.
So
Great. So what are your long-term goals? You have a target date for starting to?
well, the hope is
summer?
in the next couple of months we can finalize the design. We already have more interest for additional cookers in Haiti, and we're working with other groups. Took a few down to Panama 2 months ago, and they're just getting kind of acclimated how to adjust their cooking for solar cooking there. But the hope is to take this anywhere there's need.
Sure. Well, they might have mentioned my wife Jo, her parents were missionaries. They spent a good long time in Peru,
Okay.
Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and rice and beans.
Yeah,
Rice and
yeah.
beans. And you gotta, this is gonna be, the slow cooking for rice and beans, it's the ticket,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Great. Anything else you want to add to the story here?
I will just say this was not an adventure I was looking for, but the more I'm getting into it, it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
A lot of fun and great potential.
Okay. Well, and with that in mind, this will be the prelude. I'll have to snip and put in
Yeah.
front. How did you connect with Mike and Martha? How did that happen?
So I manage the building here, Forefront, and one of the tenants was actually here in our gift shop. We have a little gift shop where we sell our products for Vineworks, which are primarily made in Haiti. And they heard the Vineworks story and said, "Want to hear more?" So I told them the whole story. About a month later, they came to me and said our company has a grant that we can apply for, and we want to partner with Vineworks to bring solar cooking to Haiti. So we applied for the grant, and we ended up winning, and got some money to develop Mary's Cooker for Haiti, and sent 30 cookers down there last January.
Sure, sure. See, we got pretty much just the complete package here. They got the reflectors, the base for the cooker, and then it's just a pot, like an oven bag, or how's that?
Correct, and in fact, this pot here was actually made in Haiti. And so the hope would be that we'd be able to source these in volume, which would then obviously create more jobs, more opportunity. But dark pot works great. So.
It's a family size volume. So
Yeah.
that's the way it works.
Yeah.
And then the material for the heat trap.
This is a 3M polyester film, which is also UV treated.
Okay. And that's I'm familiar with that from the sport.
Correct.
Because that's the same mineral iron?
Same material.
Yeah. That'll take the heat and keep the heat in.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much.
You bet.
This is great.